Ghost Hunting in New England.
Your favorite spooky podcast. Hey everyone, happy Wednesday and welcome to Ghost Hunting in New England with your host Amelia. And sorry, still just me this week. Beth is still over in Ireland. We miss her so much. So last week on the podcast, I said I would love to have a theoretical physicist in here to talk to us about some of this crazy stuff that we look at. Because a lot of times paranormal investigators, we kind of talk about these ideas when really the majority of us have absolutely no idea what we're talking about. So I thought that'd be kind of cool. And call it serendipity, kismet, whatever. The very next day, I met a theoretical physicist, and he is here with us today. And his name is Dr. John, and we are so thrilled to have him on the podcast because what we're going to discuss today is something very, very cool, and that is called the stone tape theory, which for those of you who don't know, the basic idea behind it is that we create all these structures and things around us using rocks and stones and wood and all these things made in nature, and that our energy can get stuck in those areas. So it's kind of like when you go into a home and you immediately have a really positive feeling or you have a really negative feeling of a space. It's because all the energy is caught up in there. A lot of times paranormal investigators will kind of talk about is things, sometimes we'll call it like an energy loop or something, but that's not actually the right term for it. The right term is the stone tape theory. Some people can also call it like a residual haunting. That would be kind of a similar name for it. It's when you have a ghost doing something totally unrelated to you, not connecting with other people within the space. And it seems like they're just on a constant loop of something they did in their life. Something very small that just continues to happen over and over again, and you don't have an explanation for it. So I'm so thrilled to welcome Dr. John onto our show. Not only is he great because he's going to talk to us about all the science stuff, but he's a 2-for-1 in that he is also from England. Shout out to our UK listeners. I say this every week. I really tried. I got someone from the UK to come on. Please send me your ghost stories. So welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Amelia. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
So let's get started. What are your thoughts on the stone tape theory?
Okay, so I thought about this because when you invited me onto this show and told me that the topic was going to be on stone tape theory, I, of course, had a quick look at the Wikipedia article and wondered what possible physical phenomena could explain such a thing as stone tape theory. The closest I got in the short few hours that I got to think about it was pretty much hidden in the name, actually. Because just a regular magnetic tape has, like a variable bit of magnetic field stuck all over the tape. And when somebody records sound, or when somebody records some video or any kind of digital media, they manipulate all of those little tiny bits of magnetic field on the tape so that later on somebody can come along and replay all of those bits of information. Now that might be the case for stone tape as well. Because stone has inside of it all sorts of little bits of iron, little bits of metal, little bits of magnetic materials, and in some way, shape or form, the information that is imparted on those stones may be replayed in some way. I guess that's the roundabout way of explaining how something can be imprinted on a stone and replayed, because some sort of information has to travel from the outside into the stone.
Okay. So do you think that that could also relate to like people who have like healing crystals and stuff like that?
Surely, yeah. If you're gonna start saying that this phenomenon can happen to stones, then it could happen to a crystal. It could happen to almost anything that has a configuration, a chemical configuration or an atomic configuration, as it were. Anything that is configurable, shall we say, can store information. Whether or not a particular type of crystal can store that information is up for debate. Crystals are extremely regular things. It's difficult to try and make a crystal that is irregular, because by definition a crystal is regular. But there are all sorts of funny things that happen inside crystals that not even a theoretical physicist could fully explain.
Yeah, crystals are great. I have so many. I'm wearing them now.
Oh, let me see.
Black tourmaline
They're
and
pretty,
jade.
yeah. What is that black one again?
Black tourmaline.
Ooh, pretty.
Thank you. So in your research, which has been vast, have you ever seen anything that could explain why this would happen?
Not really, no. Because the research that I do is really just about dumping extremely large amounts of energy into extremely small regions of space and time. You're trying to increase the energy density to incredibly large levels. And when you dump energy into an extremely small region of space-time that is very local and very localized in space and time, then that energy wants to dissipate wants to dissipate out into wider space. The method through which it dissipates, or the channels, as it were, through which that energy dissipates, can reveal new physics. So, for example, in particle physics, people slam together what are called protons with an incredible amount of kinetic energy. And when these protons hit each other, they dump all of their kinetic energy into the collision point. And then all that energy has to go somewhere, because you can't create or destroy energy. This is an extremely important principle that theoretical physics lives by, that you cannot create or destroy energy. You can only convert energy from one type to another. So you convert all of the kinetic energy from the protons into this like raw energy, and it can turn up new physics. New physics can just appear in front of you, new kinds of particles, new kinds of channels and things like that. What happens is that dumping all of this energy into one little bit of space-time reveals new kinds of interactions and new kinds of fields that we were previously completely unaware of, or we had very good clues about, but we just needed some physical confirmation. In a very roundabout way, what I'm saying is that there are all sorts of what we call fields that are all around us. For example, there's a very recently discovered field called a Higgs field. And this Higgs field was theorized first in the 1960s, and after 50 years of physicists tinkering around and playing with these kinds of experiments, showed explicitly that this Higgs field exists. And so this created a proliferation of theoretical physicists coming up with fields and devising new fields and different fields that kind of explain the things that we see. And there could be a multitude of fields out there that we simply don't know about, that very well could have something to do with a stone tape, or with some sort of haunting, or with some sort of recording. It is into the one is moving into the realm of imagination. You have to have a very vivid imagination, but certainly within the realms of possibility.
I mean, couldn't you say you have to have a vivid imagination for all the stuff you guys do?
Precisely, yeah. People think that theoretical physicists are rather dry people, right-angled type of people, but you have to have quite an imagination to come up with explanations. It's very ironic that creativity is a huge driving force behind theoretical physics. Having an imagination, having ability to, use your mind and use your visual, spatial abilities to try and just think your way through things. That's the physics police coming to get me because I'm on a podcast about ghost hunting. They're coming to revoke my PhD. But no, one really does have to have a certain degree of creativity and to be off the ball, as it were.
What is going on in the background here? I'm so sorry.
People are very excited, I think.
Okay, yeah. So that is very interesting. And a lot of it flew over my head. But what you're saying is very possible ghosts exist.
I can put absolutely no probability on that question whatsoever. What I can do is give you and give your viewers a little, and your listeners, because they're listeners and not viewers.
Yeah.
Is to give your listeners the perspective from somebody who studies mathematical rules, objective rules. So I can give you an objective viewpoint about how things may manifest themselves. I mean, the stone tape thing is something I read. I read the whole page and read a few links as well. And it reminded me of a little story. May I tell you this story?
Of course.
It's a bit physics, more physics than ghosts. The North and the South Pole, magnetic poles on this planet, some of your listeners may know, flip around every 100,000 years. We know this because it's recorded in the ocean floor, because when two tectonic plates move apart, lots of lava from the center of the Earth comes bubbling up to the surface, and this lava has iron particulates inside of it, and those iron particulates are little tiny magnets. And those little tiny magnets will align themselves with the North-South Pole of planet Earth. And so for 100,000 years, they're all pointing one way. And then all of a sudden, we see that all those little tiny magnets are pointing a different way. And for a certain period of time, they're all pointing another way. And then for no reason whatsoever, they seem to be pointing another way. And what's happening is that the Earth's North and South Pole is flipping. And that flipping is recorded inside the rock on the ocean floor. So this recording of information inside rocks using magnetic phenomena is definitely something that we use as scientists to try and trace back events that happened hundreds of thousands of years ago. So it isn't that much of a stretch of the imagination to consider some event that happened only a few hundred years ago, be it the wanderings of some old lady or some lost spirit through the house in which she lived, being imparted on the rocks surrounding the house. I mean, the physical mechanism exists already. Whether or not that the stone tape theory is a valid one is left open.
So that's interesting, and it's something we have brought up on this podcast almost every single week. And if Beth was here, she would be so excited that you just said that, Because, and I don't know if you know this, Dr. John, but a major way to tell if your home is haunted is that things will occur with the electricity. It's like the number one thing. And that's why we all have EMF readers we carry around. Beth and I go into a space. It's one of the first questions we always ask is, what's going on with the electricity? And everyone who we have ever interviewed on this show has said the exact same thing. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, the
electricity. You said
electricity,
right?
Yeah, I mean, well, electricity and
Did I hear that
magnetism.
wrong?
No, you absolutely didn't
Okay.
hear that wrong. No. Electricity and magnetism used to be thought of as two completely separate things. And then a chap called James Clerk Maxwell, actually it was a chap called Michael Faraday, who first thought that electricity and magnetism might be the same thing. But his mathematics wasn't incredible. And so a Scotsman called James Clerk Maxwell came along and mathematically showed that these two things are actually the same. So one can speak electricity, one can speak magnetism, and one may give the appearance that one is speaking of two separate phenomena, but in reality, these two things are the same phenomena. So electric disturbances and magnetic disturbances are pretty much the same thing. They're electromagnetic disturbances. Indeed, this is what light is. You look around this studio and there's a fusion of light all over the place. That light is a ripple in the electromagnetic field that's all around us. So surrounding us is an electromagnetic field. And if we were in perfect darkness, then there would be no energy in that field. But as soon as you turn on a light, the electrons inside the light are connected to the electric field. And they give the electric field a bit of a wiggle. And the electric part of the field stimulates the magnetic part of the field. And the magnetic part of the field stimulates the electric part of the field. And that little stimulation propagates out as a light wave. So that's how energy is transferred through the electromagnetic field via light. But there are all sorts of different ways in which energy can be transferred, and that's just one of them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You're very smart.
I learned a few things. I just picked them up, just a couple of textbooks here and there.
Okay, so I had put out on our social media today that you were going to be here and ask some people to ask some questions. So here are some questions from our listeners. Our first question is from Mike wanting to know what stone tape theory is, and hopefully we kind of answered that. Our second question is from Abigail Dalton, psychic medium, who we recorded an interview with earlier this year. Last time Beth was on vacation. Thank you so much, Abigail. If you haven't listened to an episode, please go do so. Her first question is stone tape energy only from a single event, or can it be the result of many events over time?
Let's break it down.
Okay.
Let's go. See, this is what physicists like to do, is they like to build a model. We're going to approach this question scientifically. The first thing you do when you approach a question is to try and, you make a guess, essentially. You guess. It's the first thing you do. So I'm not going to guess blindly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to think about all the things that I know about and see if I can pull out an analogy or an analogous situation. And luckily, the name stone tape has an analogy just lying in there. The magnetic tape of a video or of an audio cassette. So when you have a tape, you can record something. You get bored of that song and you rewind the tape and you record again. Now, if that tape were perfect, all of the old tape information would just be gone and all you'd be left with is the new song. But magnetic tape isn't perfect and it can leave remnants of the old song that are in there. It's perfectly possible, for example, to record a Britney Spears song in 1993, Hit Me Baby One More Time, and it's your favorite song. And you play it, and you play it, and you play it, and you play it hundreds of times.
Yeah.
And the magnetic tape's kind of wearing down, and it's a bit funny. But then, along comes, 1999, and you watch The Matrix, and you decide that...
Wait, hold on. Britney Spears wasn't around in 1993.
Was she not?
No.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Oh, well, I'm you'll forgive me, and you'll just indulge me that, okay, somebody in 19... Tiffany, there you go. I think we're alone now.
There you go.
Okay, so Tiffany is singing in a mall. I think we're alone now, and you record it, and you play it 100,000 times because you think it's amazing. But then you get out of your Tiffany Mall phase, and you enter a little bit of an emo phase, and you watch The Matrix, and you decide that Killing in the Name Of by Rage Against the Machine is the best song ever. But you only have one tape left, and you decide to record over Tiffany. But because you played this so many times, because the magnetic information on that tape has been worn and it's not so good anymore, you try to record the new song, but the remnants of the old song are still kind of in there, if you listen carefully. So there is a possibility, to answer this question, to go back using this analogy, that if some sort of event were imparted into a stone via some mechanism that we don't need to know, let's just assume, let's just go with the working hypothesis that this thing is possible, then some event could be recorded and a second or third or fourth event could also be imparted into that stone. And maybe these N different events, say 4 of them, all play simultaneously but weakly, or maybe they mix and play a single event that is an admixture of all 4 of them. So it may be, that you put 4 colours into a mixing pot and you mix them all together and you get one colour, which is a mixture of all of them. Or you might put 4 colours into a pot and not mix them, and you see all 4 of them but not